Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Thursday, May 29th will mark the release of Capes, a turn-based superhero strategy game from developer Spitfire Interactive. After almost 40 hours, I have completed the main story and I am ready to provide a review for all of you. This game has some really high highs, but unfortunately there are some low lows as well. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and I also want to note this video is sponsored by Magiseven, makers of gemstone and glass dice. If you are looking to purchase a new set of dice, be sure to stick around at the end of this video to hear more about their products, and there's a link to their website in the description below. Alright, let's dig into the review, starting with what I like. The premise for Capes is absolutely outstanding. The game takes place in King City, an area that is basically cut off from the rest of the world and is controlled by an organization called the Company. The Company is run by a group of supervillains who went to war against the local superheroes decades ago, wiping out almost all of them in the process. Afterwards, the Company outlawed superpowers, and consequently, they are rounding up or murdering anyone who is even suspected of having powers. They do this in absolutely brutal fashion, murdering civilians, jailing and sometimes torturing heroes, and turning communities against each other out of fear of being targeted next. A handful of heroes from the old group survived, and they are handling the aftermath in completely different ways. Doctrine and Cruxus are two of those heroes, and they are pretty obviously Spitfire's take on Batman and Superman respectively from the Dark Knight Returns comic miniseries. Cruxus has left King City and now works as a government puppet. The government doesn't want to go to war with the Company, so they are allowing the supervillains to wreak havoc upon innocent people. Consequently, despite being known as insanely powerful, Cruxus is keeping himself separate from the conflict. Doctrine, on the other hand, has become a bitter, vengeful old man who is hell-bent on going to war against the people who murdered his friends. To that end, he is recruiting teenagers with superpowers who can join together and fight back against the carnage. So essentially, the story is about teenagers training under an old hero who is struggling with grief and rage, while also fighting against a trio of absolutely ruthless villains who have no qualms about murdering children and are determined to take over the world. That premise is freaking outstanding, and the game does a great job of reinforcing it over the course of your adventure. Of course, we have seen stories like this a bunch of times in comic books, but not in a video game format, and certainly not a turn-based CRPG. There's a sense of shared history between Doctrine, the supervillains, and the old heroes who have survived that is brought up all the time. It's interesting to slowly peel back layers, both about what happened in the past and also where current relationships stand. There's a weakness here that we'll talk about in the dislike section, but bottom line, the foundation that Spitfire provides in this game is absolutely incredible. But you never actually control Doctrine or Cruxus, so nothing I just said would matter if the teenagers were born to play with. Luckily, this is another area where Capes absolutely shines. Over the course of the adventure, you'll recruit 8 heroes, and they are one of the most diverse groups of party members I've ever played with, both mechanically and culturally. The art is fantastic and really pops when you are watching the heroes use their abilities or interact with each other. They all have different dominating colors, and seeing the abilities fly across the screen during chaotic battles is a real joy. I know some of you would prefer to discover the heroes on your own, so I won't reveal them here. Instead, I'll just talk about one of the heroes and do a separate video breaking down the mechanics for each one. Facet is one of the first heroes you'll meet, and he serves as a tank. You don't need to have a tank, and in some missions it's actually better to go without one, but having him in your party provides some very interesting mechanics. Facet can make crystals grow on his body that provide him with more protection. For the vast majority of the game, he's by far your most durable party member. He's also the only party member on your team who can taunt enemies. He can make one of his crystals sprout up from the ground to block off a choke point or block the line of sight of a ranged enemy. He can use his crystals on an enemy to completely immobilize small foes or significantly reduce the mobility of larger enemies. He can use the crystals on an ally, making them immune to the next hit they take. He can disarm enemies, and of course, Facet can just plain old punch enemies as well. His punch pushes enemies back, so if they are close to ledges, they'll fall over and automatically die. There's also his passive ability, Opportunist, which allows him to attack any enemy who performs an action in front of him. On top of all this, he has an ultimate ability that places crystals on all foes within 5 squares, immobilizing them. All of those options are available in just one character. All of these powers have at least 2 upgrades on his skill tree, and some even have 3. There's another character who can tank, but the mechanics for him are completely different, so they don't feel redundant. Each party member is like this, possessing a wealth of different mechanics that you can utilize in different ways for tanking, dealing damage, and buffing party members. But the fun times don't stop there, because all of them also have team ups. Each character has one team up ability that can only be used when there's a specific party member in the group who is within at least 5 squares. These team ups take your base ability and then add some degree of functionality based on the powers your companion is providing. So for example, Facet is able to taunt one enemy. If he is in the party with Mind Fire and close enough to him, then there's an option to team up and make the power a square that will taunt up to 4 enemies at one time. Mind Fire uses a power called Telekinesis to pick up random objects from the ground and fling them at enemies for heavy damage. He can team up with Facet to add crystals into the objects he launches towards enemies for a significant increase in damage. All party members have 7 team-ups, one for each of the other members of the group. Some of them even team up to make their ultimate abilities more powerful. The depth of these mechanics make your party members a lot of fun to use right from the start, and the progression of their powers is also fantastic. It takes quite some time to max them out, and yet it absolutely feels like you are slowly getting more powerful. Each party member also has a list of challenges they can complete to gain more skill points, which are used to purchase ability upgrades. These require you to perform certain actions in combat, such as Facet getting hit by enemies he has taunted. Some of these challenges will unlock dossiers instead of skill points. Dossiers are glossary entries for every character that you meet in the game. The interesting thing about the entries for heroes is that if you complete certain challenges, you'll get the option to enter into a small cutscene with one of the other members of the team. This is Cape's way of giving further insight into everyone's personality and how they are faring through this struggle. There are also some companion quests where you must take a specific character along so they can visit their family, protect a friend, or follow some lead that is of personal interest to them. Nobody will mistake this game for Mass Effect, but there is an honest attempt here to flesh out your party members, and I definitely appreciate it. Unfortunately, there is a big drawback in all of this, but we'll talk about it in the dislike section. It's very fortunate that Capes provides you with many fantastic mechanics to work with, because combat is punishing and difficult to figure out throughout the entire game. In most RPGs, as time goes on, everything starts feeling very easy, and by the end, you are cakewalking through the experience. That definitely isn't the way I felt about this game. Not only does Capes consistently throw large waves of enemies at you, but they do it in a multitude of different situations, which helps to keep the experiences fresh. One fight, you might try to take out 10 enemies in stealth. The next, you'll be facing a trio of giants flanked by swarms of soldiers. And then the next, you are facing a supervillain who is surrounded by civilians that you must carefully try not to kill. There's also a large variety of enemies you can face, and they have an equally large variety of unique mechanics that aren't available to your squad. This includes automatically attacking an enemy regardless of how far away they are, automatically making an ally take their turn next, firing on all party members in a lane, and much, much more. The mechanics that are best used against enemies vary as well. Some of them are best to disarm and slowly whittle down their health. Some are best immobilized in some manner while you take care of easier targets. Some enemies can be safely ignored once you get used to how far their movement can take them. The game doesn't just give your party members a bunch of different mechanics, they also provide a wealth of ways those powers can be utilized in combat scenarios. Usually, I don't like when a game uses waves of foes as a way to challenge the player, but Capes does such a great job of keeping you on your toes with a variety of potential combat scenarios that it really doesn't bother me here. It also helps that the upper left of the game will tell you how many phases a mission has, which gives you some idea of how many enemies you'll need to face. The last thing I'll mention that I like about Capes is that you can go back and experience any of the missions at any time. Usually, I cannot stand it when a game doesn't allow me to manually save, because you have no way to re-experience pillar moments in your playthrough, but Capes lets you do that relatively simply, and I definitely appreciate that. Hey, real quick before we get into what I didn't like, if you have enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you hitting the like button. This helps the channel out, and I definitely appreciate the support. There's nothing about this game I am neutral on, so let's head straight into what I disliked. As I mentioned a couple of times before, the writing is pretty terrible. I said in my impressions video that the writing is cringe, but honestly, this might be the worst written game I have played. Previously, I would have said that title belonged to Midnight Suns, but I think in that game, the writing has a very consistent level of cringe that was irritating to deal with, but after a while you just got used to it. The writing in Capes feels like it gets worse as you go along. Story beats that are supposed to be major moments make absolutely no sense, and mar what again is a fantastic premise. I've already mentioned there are a couple of characters clearly based on Batman and Superman, but there's also one who's obviously based on Wonder Woman. Her motivations and the reasoning for her decisions are laid out terribly in a way that really disrupts the story. But even outside of that character, there are nearly a dozen different moments where decisions are made or discussions are occurring that either the game has done a poor job of setting up or they just completely make no sense. Without spoiling any specifics, I'll provide a great general example. You spend this entire game electrocuting enemies, knocking them off the rooftops of buildings, and burning them alive. Clearly, you are killing them. There's just no way these guys are surviving what is happening. Why then does the game have a significant story thread about the importance of not killing enemies and how that makes the heroes better than the villains they are facing? It makes zero sense and is completely contrary to everything you are seeing on your screen during fights. Another aspect of this game I dislike is its leveling system. Each mission you undertake provides a set amount of XP, and it also has sub-goals that provide skill points if completed. Skill points go into a pot that all of the team members pull from, while experience points are only provided to those party members that actually participate in the mission. Skill upgrades are gate-locked behind specific levels, so your heroes need XP in order to get the best upgrades. By endgame, you'll have a team of 8 heroes, and only 4 of them can join you on a mission. I think the skill points portion of the leveling system works. How many points you get every mission is directly tied to how well you perform. You are getting more points pretty much constantly, and it's almost always a tough decision where they should be spent. It's frustrating in a good way that you cannot upgrade your heroes faster. The problem is in the XP portion of the system. Using low-level heroes can be painful, and you'll likely leave some party members behind, while others will be properly leveled with most of their upgrades taken. In my opinion, this doesn't make sense mechanically or thematically. Thematically, it's clear Doctrine is training and teaching the teenagers to engage in his war. There are multiple scenes that reference heroes hitting the gym and helping each other figure out how to become better. The idea that half of the team sits around watching TV while the other half is going out on missions just doesn't make sense to me. Mechanically, it doesn't make sense because it's obvious Cape's biggest boon is in its selection of heroes. Why would you make it harder for people to use the heroes that they wanted to? I don't understand the reasoning for why this creates a better player experience. The last thing I don't like about this game is that its turn-based combat is slow. Missions take a long time to finish because there are multiple factors which slow down the action. Every time you use an ultimate ability, you have to sit and watch the entire cutscene, some of which are quite long. Supervillains have their own ultimate abilities that also have cutscenes, which you are not able to skip. Major villains have quips to deliver at specific moments, and the game will often treat these as cutscenes, or at the very least wait until the line is delivered before the villain does their move. One villain in particular that you face multiple times has the same things to say every fight repeatedly throughout the fight. Sometimes you are allowed to skip through this dialogue, but oftentimes that isn't an available option. Add on to this again, most fights have a massive amount of people involved who all act one by one, and you can see how this becomes a problem. Now take all of this. Imagine it took you almost an hour to get through a mission, and then in the end, you failed and had to go back through it. Or you successfully completed a mission, but failed to get any of the sub goals for skill points, so now you need to do it again in order to pick them up. Also keep in mind, since the types of missions you can participate in are so diverse, it's very difficult to consistently clear all the sub goals on the first try. Usually, you complete a mission crappily first, and then you come back with the team you know can do it well. This would be no issue if combat encounters moved along at a faster pace, but because there's so many extra elements slowing down the action, it makes things drag more than they should. That completes my review of Capes. Again, I think the premise, art, mechanics, and character development in this game are really well done. The way heroes interact with each other both inside and outside of combat is fantastic. I also really enjoy combat, despite believing that it's slower than it probably should be. This game does have some other flaws. I think the writing is subpar, and the leveling system is more restricting than it should be. That being said, I absolutely recommend you give Capes a try, especially if you are a fan of the genre. I mean, come on, ask yourself, how many superhero turn-based CRPGs do we really get? The last one I heard of was Freedom Force, and that was released all the way back in 2002. There's room for improvement here, but I absolutely think what Spitfire Interactive has provided serves fans very well, and I hope it sells well enough for them to give us a sequel. I would absolutely play it. That ends my review of Capes. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Did you enjoy this review? Are you planning to buy the game? Is there any specific content you'd like to see regarding Capes? I am looking forward to hearing all of your feedback. Now, before we close out, let me tell you about dice maker Magiseven. As many of you have noticed, we are ramping up multiple tabletop games on the Discord server, and I have been telling myself to get a new set of dice. In a stroke of pure luck, Magiseven reached out and offered to send me a set to review in the hopes I would talk about it on the channel. I requested the Blue Sandstone set, and I'm really happy with it so far. The dice look fantastic, they feel great, it rolls without a problem. I've been using it for the past month. It's easy to keep up with the dice. You can either keep it in the box where it has places where it can be set in, or it also comes with a little pouch that makes it easy to transport. Magiseven provides free shipping to the United States, Canada, and Europe, and currently there's a 6% discount if you use the code Magiseven6. I do not make any money off these transactions. I just received a free set of dice that I enjoyed, and I'm happy to provide them with some exposure. There's a link down below if you are interested in more of their products. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.